There's an old gardening practice that quietly fell out of fashion when the bagged fertilizer industry took over the lawn aisle. It is called compost tea, and your great-grandparents almost certainly made a version of it without ever giving it a name. Today, I want to show you what it actually is, what the science genuinely supports, and where the wild promises fall apart. By the end of this video, you will understand the real mechanism, how to brew it correctly, and the honest limits of what it can do for your grass. No miracle claims here, just the actual biology and a few practical steps you can use this weekend. So let us start with the simplest possible question. What is compost tea, really? At its core, it is water in which finished compost has been steeped so that the soluble nutrients and the living microorganisms move from the compost into the liquid. The version most studied today is called actively aerated compost tea, where an air pump bubbles oxygen through the mix while it brews. That oxygen matters enormously, and I will explain exactly why in a moment. Before we go deeper, a quick word for those of you who like to keep useful references. I have put together a written guide that collects the brewing ratios, the timing, and the university sources behind everything in this video, and the link sits in the description below. If you find this useful, consider subscribing, because this channel is built around recovering the practical knowledge that got buried under decades of marketing. Anyway, let us get back to the soil. To understand why compost tea can help, you first have to understand that healthy soil is not dirt. It is a living system. A single teaspoon of good soil can hold billions of bacteria, along with fungi, protozoa, and tiny nematodes all working together. Researchers describe this web of life as the soil food web, and your grass depends on it far more than most people realize. Here's the part the fertilizer companies never advertise. Bacteria in the soil cycle nitrogen and lock it into their own bodies, holding it in place instead of letting it wash away. Protozoa then feed on those bacteria, and when they do, they release that nitrogen in a form the grass roots can actually absorb. Fungi, especially the mycorrhizal kind, grow around and even inside the roots, extending their reach and helping the plant pull in water and nutrients from a much larger area. Those same fungi help bind soil particles together, which improves structure and reduces the compaction that chokes so many tired lawns. This is the engine of a naturally green lawn, and a synthetic quick-release fertilizer does almost nothing to feed it. In fact, heavy use of soluble salts can suppress that biology over time, which is part of why some lawns become dependent on ever larger doses. Now, the idea behind compost tea is simple. Instead of waiting years for that biology to rebuild on its own, you brew a concentrated liquid full of those organisms, and you add them, along with their food, directly to the soil. A turf manager at the University of Colorado put it plainly when he said he did not want to wait for nature, so he chose to add to it. That is the honest promise of compost tea. Not explosive overnight growth, but a faster path to a living soil that can feed itself. And let me be very clear about something, because this is where most videos lie to you. Compost tea is not a fertilizer in the conventional sense, and it is not a magic growth potion. The research on this is genuinely mixed, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Some studies show measurable improvements in turf quality and in the populations of beneficial soil microbes after repeated applications. A study published in 2023 found that aerated compost tea could improve soil microbial activity, but also noted that results were inconsistent and often required several applications before populations stabilized. Other researchers have found that simply adding microbes through tea did not, by itself, reliably boost plant growth in every trial. The strongest and most consistent evidence is actually for disease suppression, where compost tea has been shown to help fight certain plant pathogens. So the truthful summary is this. Compost tea is a soil conditioner that supports biology and can aid disease resistance, and it works best as one part of good lawn care, not as a replacement for everything else. If anyone tells you a single spray will make your grass explode, they are selling you a story. With that honesty in place, let me show you how to actually make it, because the method matters more than almost anything. The single most important factor is oxygen. Good compost tea is aerobic, meaning the beneficial organisms you want need oxygen to thrive. If the brew runs out of air and turns anaerobic, you can actually grow harmful organisms instead, and at that point, you're doing more harm than good. That is why the aerated method, with an air pump running the whole time, is the version most experts now recommend. The second factor is the quality of your compost. Your tea can only ever be as good as the compost you start with, so you want finished, mature, sweet-smelling compost, ideally including worm castings, which are especially rich in microbial life. The third factor is your water. If you use municipal tap water, the chlorine in it can kill the very microbes you are trying to cultivate. The simple fix is to let your water sit out uncovered for about 24 hours so the chlorine can dissipate before you brew. Now, here's a basic, honest recipe to get you started. Take a clean bucket of around 5 gallons and fill it with that dechlorinated water. Add roughly 1 to 2 cups of high-quality finished compost, placed inside a porous cloth bag so it steeps like an actual tea bag. Drop the air stone from an aquarium pump into the bottom of the bucket and turn it on so the water churns and bubbles steadily. Many brewers add a very small amount of unsulfured molasses as a food source for the bacteria, though I want to flag a real caution here. Some research has shown that added sugars can, under the wrong conditions, encourage unwanted organisms. So if you use it, use only a teaspoon or so and never let the brew sit unused. Let the mixture aerate for somewhere between 24 and 36 hours, no longer. Here is a rule worth remembering. Compost tea is alive, and it does not keep. Once you stop the air supply, the oxygen drops quickly, so you want to use your finished tea within a few hours of switching off the pump. To apply it, you can dilute it and pour it over the soil, or strain it well and use it in a sprayer. Applying it to the soil feeds the root zone directly, while a foliar spray coats the leaves, and both have their place. A reasonable rhythm for a home lawn is an application every couple of weeks through the growing season, not a single heroic dose. And this brings me to the most important honest point of the entire video. Compost tea is a supplement to good practice, never a substitute for it. The turf science is consistent on what actually builds a great lawn over time. You need to raise the organic matter in your soil, which compost itself does directly. You need to aerate compacted ground so air, water, and roots can move freely. You need to mow high and overseed thin areas, so healthy grass crowds out the weeds on its own. Compost tea sits on top of those fundamentals and helps the biology along, but it cannot replace them, and no honest source will claim it can. If your soil is severely degraded, the tea alone will not rescue it. You have to rebuild the foundation too. So let me bring this all together before we finish. Compost tea is a genuine, time-tested practice, not a forbidden secret and not a miracle. It works by delivering living organisms and their food into your soil, accelerating the recovery of the soil food web that ultimately feeds your grass. The evidence is real but modest, strongest for soil biology and disease resistance, and it rewards consistency over any single application. Brew it aerobically, start with excellent compost, use clean water, and apply it fresh as part of a complete lawn care routine. Do that. And over a season, you're likely to see a more resilient, more self-sufficient lawn that leans less and less on the bag. If you want the full written guide with the exact ratios, the brewing schedule, and links to the university research behind today's video, you will find it in the description. And if this honest, no-hype approach to gardening is what you have been looking for, subscribe to this channel so the next one finds you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.